The people of Mittani. The Mittani dynasty ruled over the northern Euphrates-Tigris region between circa 1475 BCE and circa 1275 BCE. While the Mittani kings were Indo-Iranians, they used the language of the local people, which was at that time a non-Indo-Iranian language, Hurrian, and so the land is sometimes referred to in ancient records as the land of the Hurrians. The historian, Lake, writes, "The population of Mittani was predominantly Hurrian, but the ruling elites were Indo-European warriors, who called themselves Marianu, and who worshipped deities with Vedic names, such as Indar, Uruwana, and the collective Devas. This elite was to intermarry with the local population, as the names of their children testify." The capital of Mittani was Wasukani, located on the headwaters of the river Habur, a tributary of the Euphrates. The name Washukani is similar to the Kurdish word Bashkani, Bash meaning good, and Kani meaning well or source, and so is translated as source of good, but also as source of wealth. Some scholars have claimed that the ancient city of Sikan was built on the site of Washukani, and that its ruins may be located under the mound of Tel el Fakhariya, near Gozan, in Syria. The Great Kingdom. At its height, the Mittani dynasty controlled trade routes down the Habur to Mari, and up the Euphrates to Carchemish. They also controlled the upper Tigris and its headwaters at Nineveh. Their allies included Kizzuwatna in southeastern Anatolia, Mukish, which stretched between Ugarit and Qatna west of the Orontes to the sea, and the Niya, which controlled the east bank of the Orontes from Alala down through Aleppo, Ebla, and Hama to Qatna and Kadesh. To the east, the Mittani had good relations with the Hurrian-speaking Kassites, whose territory corresponds to present-day Kurdistan. The lands of the Mittani in northern Syria bordered eastern Anatolia to its west, and extended east as far as Nuzi, present-day Kirkuk, and the river Tigris in the east. In the south, it extended from Aleppo across to Mari on the Euphrates in the east. The entire region allowed agriculture without artificial irrigation. Herds of cattle, sheep, horses, and goats were raised, and the Mittani were famed horsemen and charioteers. It is recorded that they were the innovators who spearheaded the development of the light war chariot, with wheels that used spokes, rather than the solid wood wheels, such as those used by the Sumerians, so that the chariots were faster and easier to maneuver. Excavation of the Hittite archives of Hattusa, near present-day Boğazkale, Turkey, found the oldest surviving horse training manual in the world. The work was written in 1345 BCE on 4 tablets and contains 1,080 lines by a Mittani horse trainer named Kikuli, beginning with the words, "Thus speaks Kikuli, master horse trainer of the land of Mittani," and exhaustively describes the proper methods of training horses. King Tushratta and the Coming of the Hittites. Little is known of the early kings of Mittani, owing to the later destruction of the culture by the Assyrians, but the names of the early rulers are known through the correspondences with other countries. In the 16th century BCE, the most prominent kings seem to have been Kirta, Shutarna, and Baratarna. King Shaushtatar, ruled circa 1430 BCE, extended the boundaries of Mittani through the conquest of Alalak, Nuzi, Assur, and Kizzuwatna. Egypt, under Thutmose III, 1479 to 1425 BCE, defeated the Mittani at Aleppo after a long period of contention over control of the region of Syria. Later Egyptian dynasties entered into pacts and treaties with Mittani and the daughter of the Mittani king, Tushratta. The princess Taduhepa was given in marriage to Amenhotep III, 1391 to 1353 BCE, as part of a treaty which balanced power between the two nations. This treaty was put to the test during a power struggle in Washukani between Tushratta and a relative of the previous king, Shatarna, known as Artatama II. Egypt backed Tushratta in this conflict, while the Hittite king, Suppiluliuma I, backed Artatama II. Tushratta seemed poised to succeed when Egypt, fearing the growing power of the Hittites, withdrew its support. Suppiluliuma I, tired of diplomacy and now free to do as he pleased without fear of Egyptian reprisal, led his forces on Washukani and sacked it. Tushratta was assassinated by his son, perhaps in an effort to save the city. Following this conquest, Mittani was ruled by Hittite kings. The Assyrian conquest of Mittani. Suppiluliuma I divided the former kingdom into two provinces, with their capitals at Aleppo and Carchemish. The remainder of the region kept some degree of autonomy, though still a vassal state, and was known as Hanagalbat. At some point, the region which was once Mittani fell under the yoke of the Assyrian Empire. Exactly when is not clear, but possibly during the reign of the Hittite king Mursili II, 1321 to 1295 BCE, and definitely before the reign of Tudhaliya IV and the Battle of Nihria in 1245 BCE, which marks the beginning of the decline of the Hittite Empire. The Assyrian king Adad-nirari I, ruled 1307 to 1275 BCE, left inscriptions telling of how an upstart Hittite king, Shatuwara I, challenged his might, and so Adad-nirari I marched on Mittani, crushed their forces in battle, and carried Shatuwara I back to Ashur in chains, where he was forced to swear an oath of allegiance to the Assyrian ruler. While still an autonomous state, the kingdom now owed tribute and allegiance to Assyria, and was no longer considered an equal of the other powers of the region. Ancient Assyrian records further tell how, in the reign of King Shalmaneser I, 1270s to 1240s BCE, King Shatuwara II of Mittani rebelled against Assyria with the aid of a nomadic tribe known as the Achlamu around 1250 BCE. Shatuwara's forces were well organized, fully armed, and had occupied all the mountain passes and waterholes to effectively cut off the Assyrian army's water supply and severely hamper their attempts at foraging. Even so, hungry and thirsty, Shalmaneser's army won a crushing victory. He claims in the records to have slain 14,400 men, and the survivors were blinded and carried away. His inscriptions mention the conquest of 9 fortified temples. 180 Hurrian cities were turned into rubble mounds, and Shalmaneser slaughtered like sheep the armies of the Hittites and the Achlamu, his allies. The cities from Taidu, also known as Taita, to Eridu were captured, an area which today comprises northern Iraq through Syria, as well as all of the region of the Mount Kashiyari range, down to and including the city of Eluhat, also known as Eluhut, which was located southeast in modern-day Turkey. A large part of the population of the conquered regions were sold into slavery and deported. Mittani was then completely absorbed into the Assyrian Empire and gradually forgotten by history.